Mark Durrant, who joins us on the Deseret First Credit Union hotline, former BYU basketball player, current BYU basketball radio analyst. Mark, welcome back to the show. Hope you're enjoying your holiday thus far.
I am, and I think I'd rather be KVN than Mark Durrant, but I'd rather be Spencer Linton than Mark Durrant as well. So
we'll have to converse about that, Mark. There are some things that might change your mind about that. Notably, the paycheck that you make as a lawyer. So, Mark, you witnessed BYU basketball split their road trip. A win at Pepperdine, a place that BYU has traditionally struggled, yet they've won 2 in a row at Firestone Fieldhouse. I know you watched that game, and then at San Francisco in person to watch BYU take on the Dons, ultimately a 19-point blowout loss. What do you think of the road split, and what are your thoughts after both of those games?
Yeah, well, I've seen a lot of losses in the last 2 years at Pepperdine. So, I was nervous for the team going into that game. They haven't had a great deal of success on the road. I thought that was one of their best games and was really encouraging after coming off of that homestand where they played well and then winning that game. I kind of felt like, well, this team's kind of finding their identity. They're playing good basketball, and I was really pleased. And then you go into the San Francisco game, and they basically laid an egg in that one. That's frustrating. You think you're taking some steps forward, and then you take steps back. Now, with that said, San Francisco is an excellent team. I mean, I'm really impressed. They're the real deal. But BYU's had a lot of success at San Francisco, and I don't know that I expected BYU to win that game, guys, but I expected a competitive game, and they just laid an egg, and so that's frustrating. But I think for this team to get 1 of 2 on any road trip is probably successful. But I just was not happy with how they played against San Francisco. I thought that was a setback for them.
Yeah, I feel the same way. Given how BYU's played at Pepperdine, it was nice to win that game. That was a good win, especially this team's struggles on the road. That was great. But I'm looking for BYU to be more competitive. BYU 4-0 against the teams below them in league, 0-2 with blowout losses at St. Mary's and San Francisco now. How can BYU get a little more competitive in those games against the upper crust?
Well, I mean, that's the real question, isn't it? I'm really interested to see how BYU will do against St. Mary's this coming week, this Thursday. And then when they play San Francisco again, because it can get away from you on the road. Happens to everybody.
Yep.
But San Francisco and St. Mary's just looked so much better. I mean, they were clearly the better teams. And I don't know if a home court advantage is enough to put BYU over the top against those teams. They're going to have to really make some changes and play obviously much better and get better as a team to be able to compete even at home against those teams. So that's the real concern for me. With respect to being on the road, when they do play good teams, and the pattern has seemed to be, well, for the first 5 or 10 minutes, they do a nice job, but then the other team will hit a couple big shots. They'll get behind 4 or 5 points, and then they kind of go away from everything that they do. They start being individual players, trying to get it all back at once. Guys, I'm gonna get us back in this. I'm gonna hit this shot. And they force shots. They try and go one-on-one, and they become a different team when they're behind, and they seem to fall apart a little bit, to be honest with you. And they let the crowds was great at San Francisco and St. Mary's. They let that get to them, I think, a little bit. And before you know it, they're down 10 or 15 points. And at that point, they recover a little bit, but they're just not good kind of looking up at teams trying to get back in a game. Obviously, they're better when they have a little bit of a cushion and they're playing within themselves and they're playing steady. It just gets away from you on the road, and that's not really an indictment necessarily on this team. It just happens, and unless you're a really good team with a strong identity and confidence in yourself, if those situations arise on the road, they can get away from you very, very quickly.
BYU basketball radio analyst Mark Durrant with us on BYU Sports Nation. I guess my next question then to follow that up is, Mark, what do you do? What does BYU do to address this when they are not handling things, I don't know, well mentally on the road when it's tough and things are getting away from them?
Well, the hard thing is that's not a quick fix. That's not something you say, well, let's work on this principle in practice or this skill in practice and get better at that. I mean, it's more of a mentality and identity and chemistry, and I don't know how you fix that other than you just try and get better over time. And that's why it was a bit frustrating, because I thought they were addressing some of those issues. Obviously, it's easier at home, but they played well at home. And then that Pepperdine game, I thought there were a couple of times where they could have fallen apart, but they didn't, and they held that lead and were able to get a win. So that's why it was frustrating to see the San Francisco game, because they're kind of falling back against what had hurt them earlier in the season. So I hope that's just a little bit of a setback, and they get home. And I mean, obviously the game against St. Mary's is huge, guys. I mean, if you can win that, everything's good, and you're right where you kind of want to be. But if they lose that, that's really hard to come back from, because they're competing against St. Mary and San Francisco, and obviously Gonzaga, but they're kind of in a different league. But you want to be able to beat the St. Mary's and San Francisco's in the world, particularly at home.
Absolutely. St. Mary's Thursday night, Gonzaga the next Thursday night. So the next couple of weeks are going to be really fun. In the league, Gonzaga 5-0, San Francisco 4-1, St. Mary's 4-1, BYU 4-2. Then after that, Santa Clara 3-3, and everyone else is below 500. Do you feel like BYU is clearly the fourth best team as indicated in the standings right now?
Yeah, I think so. St. Mary's had a nice comeback win. I think it was against Pacific. They were behind in that game. I think Santa Clara was behind in that game. But I think that they're going to – those teams will struggle. They'll fall back. And I think BYU is showing that they can beat those types of teams on the road. And so I suspect that those top four teams will kind of continue to play well, and the others will fall back a little bit. I'm a little bit surprised with San Diego. I thought they'd be a better team. But that looks to be the case, and that's what you want. You want to be in the top four. So in the tournament, you're not playing Thursday or Friday. You're playing that Saturday game. I think that's the ideal position. Obviously, it'd be great if BYU is number 2 and they get a bye to Monday. But I think just to avoid the being 5 or lower is probably what BYU should shoot for at this point.
The Cougars are 2-7 in true road games this season, 9-1 at home. And is it as simple as BYU needing to play more home games? Because I'm with you. I think we'll find out a lot about this BYU team on Thursday when they play a really good St. Mary's team in Provo. What do you think?
Well, I think that college basketball, more than any other sport, is dependent on or it can give you an advantage for playing at home. It's just so different. The gyms are different. The crowds are right on top of you. To me, it's 10 points. So if you're going to beat San Francisco on the road, you got to beat them by 10 points on, let's say, a neutral court. And so that's a huge advantage. But the good teams can beat the Pepperdines on the road, but obviously the great teams can beat San Francisco's and St. Mary's. And I don't know that BYU's ever really had a great team in the last while, except for the Jimmer years. I mean, Jimmer went to San Diego State when they were a top 5 team and beat that. Those are the elite teams. Now, obviously, you're not going to have that every year, but what you'd like is to at least be competitive and maybe get 1 or 2. And BYU hasn't even got 1 or 2. And in the past few years, they've beaten Gonzaga. And those are the types of wins I'm talking about. But BYU has yet to do that this year. They haven't won any road games, which and in a lot of instances haven't even been competitive in games that they should have at least been competitive. So that's the concern. And again, we talked about that already. And how do you fix that? It's tough. You need to get more consistency. Not only from Yoli. Yoli was not good in the first half against San Francisco. TJ's been pretty good for the most part. But then you're not getting consistency from other guys. Luke will have a good game one game and a terrible game the next game. And it just go down the list, and that's the case for everybody. I think you need to get more consistency beyond Yoli and TJ to be able to compete on the road. And older guys and better players don't have the trouble playing on the road as much as kind of the freshmen and the younger guys, because that's much more difficult for those guys to play well in those situations. And they're just not getting much outside of TJ and Yoli in those types of games. So, again, just kind of rambling on a little bit, but because there's really no particular answer, but everyone has to just kind of look at themselves and say, I'm going to give the effort it takes on the road, and I'm going to play with confidence and not try and do too much, but play my role and just be competitive in those games and give yourselves a chance at the end.
Mark, we'll finish with this. True or false, BYU will win against St. Mary's on Thursday?
I don't think in my entire life I've ever picked against BYU. I'm not going to start tonight or today. I think they'll win. I think with a home crowd, and I think they'll find a way. I hope so, because they need it. They need to get this win if they want to have some success the rest of the way. And they've got good players, and they got a great coach, and so it's about time they kind of put it all together and got a big win at home.
Mark, great to have you with us. Hope you enjoy the rest of your holiday. And I really don't think that you want to be me.
I think you should think about it.